Great. Well, welcome. And I should introduce myself. My name is Catherine Morris from Consensus Building Institute, and I'm filling in for David Plum. And good to meet all of you. Some of you I have worked with in other capacities, but I understand that you haven't been together for a while. Last December, was that the last time you guys met? So we thought, I guess we should do a quick approval of the minutes from that meeting you had in December, on the 2nd of December. So let's get that out of the way. Is there anyone who has any concerns or edits to those meeting minutes, which were linked in the agenda? Have you had, or do you need more time to review them? Okay,
Make a motion we approve the minutes as presented.
Great, thanks. And no objections. So the minutes are approved.
Abstention. I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you, David. All right, well, let's then move to I'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to do today. The main issue or the main focus of the conversation today is on the response to the House Speaker's letter asking for this committee or at the council to take on the recommendations to the legislature about priorities for resilience and adaptation. And we will spend some of that time just reviewing what has already been happening on that front to give you some grounding in what has already been moving forward, and then talk a little bit about recommendations that have already been suggested by the council to the legislature and how we want to respond. I don't think we're gonna have time in this meeting to get to the substance of that. In fact, I know we won't. So we're gonna have to probably have another meeting to get more into the substance, but that'll give you more time to really process some of this information we're gonna share today. With that, we have a couple of other items on the agenda at the end, and we'll talk about we have some time for public comment, as well as, I think, Marion, you're going to talk a little bit about what additional technical analysis might be needed as they move into the next climate action plan. Any questions about the agenda as we proposed? Okay, well, let's jump in. I did want to take a few extra minutes in this call since you haven't been together for a while. There might be some new faces, and I don't know all of you. If we could just do a quick around the horn introductions, name and organization. And why don't we add a sentence or two about a highlight from the past year since you haven't seen each other, either personal or professional. And Jane, you have a question before we jump into that.
Yeah, I was just going to encourage folks to actually state their affiliation with the committee too. Like if they're currently on the subcommittee, if they're counselor, if they're state staff, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks. That would be helpful too. So I am going to go in the order of that I see you. Jane, go ahead. Why don't you jump in? What's been a highlight of your year too?
Oh, okay. Some of you I don't actually know. So Jane Lazorchak, I lead the Climate Action Office in the Agency of Natural Resources. Used to sort of coordinate exclusively the council work. And so I guess the highlight over the last year is that we now have a Climate Action Office in the Agency of Natural Resources. And so, yeah, nice to see you all and be together again.
David Dean, you're on my right.
I doubt that, but let me see. I come out of a legislative history, spent a lot of time on the natural resources committees, and helped develop some of the energy that moved forward to become the Climate Council. I guess the big thing relative to the Climate Council for me over the last year is that I was appointed by the Speaker just I don't know, December, January of this just past year. So I've been here less than a year.
Highlight? Highlight of your year? Anything you want to mention personally or
Oh,
professionally?
I'm sorry. I maybe didn't context it. The highlight has been appointed.
Oh, being appointed. Okay. All right.
Council, which happened in this year.
All right. Great. Otis. Mind going next?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Otis Elms Monroe. I'm at the Agency of Transportation. I'll be at staff. I'm a state staff person as my role here. I'm on Andrea's team, the environmental policy and sustainability over there, focused on resilience. I think I mentioned I just joined in July, so I'm definitely new. And my highlight since then is since I came on, we've managed to finish up our resilience improvement plan, which is a plan through one of the infrastructure bill programs. So that's exciting, and we're looking forward to implementing it. So
Congratulations.
my highlight.
Ann Lawless.
Hi, everybody. I think I'm still on the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee. I'm the Select Board Chair in the town of Wheelock in Caledonia County. And professionally, I do outreach for the Heat Squad program, weatherization audits in the Northeast Kingdom. And my highlight is that all of this work is moving forward. And it was kind of nice to have a big break from these very frequent meetings that we had a year or so ago.
Understood. Marion.
Hey everyone, Marion Woles. I'm the Resilience Adaptation Coordinator at the Climate Action Office, working closely with Jane. I am a member of the subcommittee, so excited to be with you all and continue this work. Let's see, highlight in the last year. I met a gardening hero, Charlie Nardosian, was on a gardening show in June, and it's on YouTube forever if you want to go look at it. We did a tour of our house and gardens, and it was pretty epic. So that was a highlight. I don't think I'll ever be able to top that.
You're more than 2 minutes of fame, it sounds like. You'll have to put a link in the chat. All right, and next up, Allie Webster, and then just to give you a warning, Stephanie, you're next on my screen anyway.
Hey everybody, I'm Allie Webster. I work for Northeastern Vermont Development Association, one of the regional planning commissions for the Northeast Kingdom, and I am an energy planner with them. I'm also on my local Peachum Energy Committee, and Dave Snedeker, who is the executive director of NVDA, he is on the subcommittee. I think I was appointed to the Climate Council recently, so I'm kind of just getting the lay of the land and listening in today, potentially joining. And a highlight from the year, well, this is very recent. We just got school photos back yesterday, and they are adorable.
Yeah, now you have to figure out how many to buy, right? That's the next. Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. Stephanie Smith. I'm the State Hazard Mitigation Officer at Vermont Emergency Management. So I serve on this committee as staff support for VEM. And I'll take a highlight of this week because yesterday the Secretary of Administration signed the adoption for the 2023 State Hazard Mitigation Plan, which expires next Friday. So just on time, we're getting it through the door. So looking forward to sharing that with all of you very soon.
Seems like that was Ben's highlight as well.
Well, now he can pick something else.
So Eric, and next up, Jens, after Eric.
Hello, Eric Foran. I'm the Director of Vermont Emergency Management. I am a member of this subcommittee, and my most recent highlight is last December I was the deputy, and now I am the full director. So that was my highlight.
Another congratulations.
Thank you.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Jens Hilke. I'm a conservation planner with Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. I serve as state staff. And a highlight in the last year is we're working on the new update to Vermont conservation design that we will release by the end of the year. So that's been a fun science project.
And sorry for mispronouncing your name. Thanks for that. All Okay, Paula and then Andrea.
Hi, I'm Paula Melton. I am on the council as the representative of municipal governments. My day job is working at Building Green, where I write and help get content out there about sustainability and resilience of the built environment. And I don't have a highlight. I'm having a really hard year, so I'm blanking on what would be a good thing to say. All right, all done. Thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Should I go?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Andrea Wright. I'm the environmental policy manager at VTrans, and I'm leading the newly established environmental policy and sustainability program. So we've got Otis leading our resilience, and we have 3 other staff working more on climate mitigation initiatives. And I am on the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee. I was on science and data when the Vermont Climate Council started getting going. I have participated in some of the rural resilience and adaptation subcommittee meetings, but just really on the side. Haven't really been engaged in that until just recently. I think I am the nominated co-chair from the administration. So we'll see how that goes and who else might co-chair.
Thank you. Ben and then David and then Ann Margalis. David Grass, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ben Rose. I work for Vermont Emergency Management as the Recovery and Mitigation Section Chief. I'm supporting the committee as VEM staff to Director Forand. I am coming to you from the FEMA Joint Field Office in Williston, where I'm embedded as the alternate state coordinating officer for the summer's flooding, sort of deep in FEMA world. And I guess my low light was the flood that hit starting in July, and my highlight was the many illustrations it provided of the significance of that mitigation work we've accomplished since Irene. All the things that didn't get damaged this time because of mitigation since Irene. Another highlight I do want to flag is the success, again, on the ground, real projects of the Flood Resilient Community Fund, which was a priority plank of this committee's advocacy. And we go into the legislative session trying to figure out how to keep that state hazard mitigation program alive and moving forward beyond the federal American Rescue Plan funding that combined with the Climate Action Council created the confluence which led to that allocation. And had a second grandkid this year, and it's great to see Chairman David Dean. I served as his clerk once upon a time in House Natural Resources and Energy and would follow him into fire anytime. And I also have to say that I have other meetings, so we'll be probably jumping off at 10:30, but feel fully triangulated by Eric and Stephanie.
Great. Sounds like you had a good year. David Grass and then Ann.
David Grass. I work at the Vermont Department of Health, and I'm state staff supporting the committee. I oversee 5 different programs within the Department of Environmental Health, one of them being the Climate and Health Program, which is funded by the CDC and focuses primarily on hot weather preparedness and supporting weatherization and health projects. For a low light, I'll follow Ben's lead and say that the overlapping disasters this summer with flooding and air quality, as well as some heat through really complex challenges at the health department in terms of the guidance that we were putting out when you have simultaneous disasters like that. And the highlight is that we've made a lot of progress within the health department in terms of making the argument that responding to climate change needs to be a department level activity and can't just be siloed within one program at the health department. And the crises that we faced this summer really drove that point home. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Anne.
Hi, Anne Margolis, Deputy Planning Director at the Department of Public Service in Vermont. I'm staff support. And I would say a highlight professionally is we're reaching the culmination of a very intensive 18-month public engagement around the renewable energy standard in Vermont. And many of folks on this call have been involved in that. So looking at and studying and evaluating how we get to 100% cleaner renewable energy standard up from 75% renewable, which is the current goal. We've learned a lot about public engagement, and we've gotten, a ton of great analysis and as well as stakeholder input, and hopefully that's leading toward very soon here a package of recommendations. Appreciate everyone here has been involved in that, and hope folks who want to tune in will do that on our renewables webpage, which I'll put in the chat.
Thanks, Anne. Alice Peel, and then Michael Burke, and then Val.
Hi, I'm Alice Peel. I'm a member of this subcommittee, and I know a group of you I always see on other committees too, but I am the chairperson of the Waitsfield Planning Commission, and also I'm chairing the Central Vermont Regional Commission. I'm chairing their new regional plan committee. There'll be a new regional plan in Central Vermont that will be looking more at land use. And I'm also a member of the Winooski Basin Water Quality Committee. So I'm finding I'm getting much more involved with CVRPC projects, everything that has to do with water. Jens knows me. Say the word wetlands and I raise my hand. So, but looking forward to this.
You have a highlight you'd like to share?
Highlight. Well, I think I'm sorry to be late to joining, but I think the highlight is working with CVRPC. I think I'm finally getting the current iteration of the Waitsfield Town Plan passed. So the highlight will be Monday and Tuesday next week.
It's fast, great. Michael.
Good morning, everyone. I am Mike Burke. I am a member of the Rural Resilience Subcommittee. I lead GMP field operations statewide, and what I would say is we feel like we've been on the front end of climate change for about 10 to 15 years now, seeing it head on. Just to give I wouldn't call it a highlight, but just a fact. We usually average 1 to 2 storms that hit major storm criteria in the state of Vermont. In the past 12 months, we've had 6, including like 3 flooding events and 2 snowstorms that if you melted the snow down, you had between 4 and 5 inches of precipitation. So if that had been in the summer, it would have been a flooding event. The highlight to be an alternative to that information is we've been studying and pushing new innovative ways to get the lines underground versus overhead. And we recently found a machine that originated in Europe, but we have found a bunch in the US now that actually installs, backfills, and does all the work putting the lines in the ground while driving along a road at about 1 mile an hour. So we're really excited about that. With 80 years of tree growth compared to when a lot of these lines went in, the 25-foot easements with 80-foot trees next to them just don't work anymore. And we don't think the answer is cut 150-foot swaths around where everyone lives. So we feel like underground's the answer and the cost-effective answer. And we're excited to say that we found a machine that is going to head us in that direction. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And Val.
Hi, everyone. Val Story. I am a member of this subcommittee. Professionally, I'm a senior program manager at the Great Plains Institute, where I work quite a lot on transmission and wholesale market issues and utility regulation. I also work with communities and local governments around hydrogen and making sure that policy is going to actually achieve carbon reductions. And perhaps most salient to this committee is I work with communities and local governments around energy resilience and utility scale solar siting. And my highlight for the year is that, well, sadly, we left the community of Underhill, but we did buy over 100 acres of land in Peru, Vermont, and we'll be building a home. So looking forward to getting back home, mostly where I grew up, and getting involved in local government there.
Wow, exciting. Wow. So last three, Bronwyn, Megan, and then Sue.
Hi all, I'm Bronwyn Cook. I am a community planning and policy manager in the Department of Housing and Community Development. Most of what we do is working with municipalities and RPCs to help do good local planning and implementation of projects that help keep our downtowns and villages vibrant, and now thinking a lot about how to also make them resilient to climate change. I'm going to probably spend the most of the day trying not to overthink what this highlight says about me, but I think one of the highlights that I had this summer was getting to take a seaplane from Montpelier, Berlin Airport, and land in the Hudson River in New York. And as an overthinker, I did spend a lot of time thinking about what that must do to my per capita emissions, but it was a very cool way to see the state of Vermont, to be able to fly over some of these places that I've only ever seen from foot. It was, just a really cool thing to do. Professionally, I would say the highlight has been working with the Climate Action Office on trying to integrate climate energy planning into some of the work that my division does. So that's been great.
Thank you. Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan O'Toole. I'm also with the Climate Action Office in the mitigation program, and have been working on ways to understand how to integrate the benefits of resilience and adaptation activities into mitigation activities, and vice versa. So I'm interested in listening in on the discussion today. I'm not a member of the subcommittee, just staff supporting the Climate Action Office. And a highlight of my year related to the work of this committee. I live in a very rural community in central Vermont, and we've done a lot of work over the last decade improving our road infrastructure to be more resilient to rain events. And so we actually were very fortunate to come out of the flooding events of the summer in pretty much unscathed. And I think a lot of that was a credit to the work that we've done to make our infrastructure more resilient to those events. And we did so with a lot of state support and state funding. So that was really great to see that infrastructure actually serving its purpose. So thanks.
Thank you. Sue?
Good morning. My name is Sue Plant. I'm the administrative assistant to Vermont Emergency Management, and I take the minutes of these beautiful meetings. And it's been a couple years, believe it or not. So it's kind of cool to see your faces. And I'm sorry my camera is not cooperating this morning, but believe me, I'm doing you a favor. The highlight, I think, since the last time I saw you guys, my name has changed. I got married. So I went from Sue Charbonneau to Sue Plant. And I moved from Duxbury down to Groton, and I love Groton. It's a beautiful little town.
Congratulations. That sounds wonderful. So thank you all for sharing. And it did take a little bit longer, but I know it's always helpful just to reconnect on both personal and professional fronts. So thanks for taking the time to do that. And I see we've got Marion's video has been posted in the meantime, so we can all go watch that afterwards. It sounds like a lot of you have been really on the front lines of some of the events over the past year. And that is what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to hand it next to Jane for an update on just sort of the role of this committee and the co-chair status.
Thanks, Catherine. Really nice to hear from all of you. I just dropped 2 documents in the chat to help sort of guide the conversation. I was just going to lead you in and update you on. First in the chat is the overall subcommittee membership document that will actually show you all the current members of this subcommittee with stars next to denoting if they serve as a counselor as well. And the second document is an updated document that is still listed as draft, but has been approved by the council at their September meeting. I'm recognizing that it needs to be updated on our website to say final, but it is an updated governance document for the Climate Council. For folks who have been with us and playing along since the beginning of the Climate Council, we had a document that was called the Process Roadmap. That document was drafted with support from David Plum and myself early on in the process that really sort of played multiple roles. It was somewhat of a governance document, but it really was drafted with an eye to the first climate action plan. So it really didn't speak to the long-term governance of the Climate Council, really spoke to how we were going to get and set up the infrastructure needed to adopt the first climate action plan. Appreciating we were sort of through that and thinking about the long-term systems and structure in place, also understanding that myself and Marion were now no longer positions that really supported the council exclusively, tried to set up a system long-term to think about how the administrative process of the council would work. That document is the second one in the chat. I actually, in the conversations with Marion leading up to this meeting, actually have flagged that there is more clarity needed in the document around what we're about to talk about a little bit. So plan to do that with the steering committee when we meet next week. But for now, what I wanted to reference in there is there's some sections that speak to co-chairs as well as subcommittee membership and terms. So first, for folks who are new, subcommittees are chaired. It has been historical and now going forward articulated in this document that subcommittees will be co-chaired by 2 counselors, one representing the administrative appointments on the council and one representing the legislative appointments on the council. The legislative appointments being both from the Senate and the oh my God, the Senate and the House. I literally forgot the word House for a minute.
The People's House.
The People's House, David, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And so the administrative position for you all had been Erica Borneman from VEM. Obviously, Erica's moved on to other roles, as well as Catherine Dimitruk, who was a counselor who has also transitioned off the council at this point. So you have 2 vacancies for co-chairs. The way that the administration position has worked, continues to work with all subcommittees is that the administration largely just coordinates behind the scene and picks someone who best represents the seat and has capacity, or I'm not sure if Andrea would say she has capacity, but she's been picked. And so there's an appreciation that recognizing right now that Andrea Wright from, as you all just heard, is the sort of presumptive nominee for the administrative seat on this. We have new counselors stepping on. We have new counselors from the House, Paula and David, who are both joining your subcommittee. But in addition to that, and because they've actually been with us for a year now, but you all haven't met, we also have new Senate appointments. And so those seats were intentionally staggered to transition, and House and Senate counselor seats transition every 3 years off, and new appointments are made. Some folks chose to be reappointed, some folks didn't, Catherine Dimitruk being one who chose to step down. Other seats stayed on, such as Leslie Ann Dupini-Giroux with a House seat who stayed on as the state representing state climate change science. So We just got new Senate appointments as well, and Allie is here representing that seat for Resilience and Adaptation. And so Allie hasn't been officially appointed to this subcommittee. You'll see in that document that the steering committee officially appoints counselors, as well as what we expect to be co-chairs too, but that's where there's a little bit of vagary in the document. And so Allie is gracious enough to join today. I expect she'll be best suited for this subcommittee and choose to be appointed here by the steering committee. But there's some sort of discussion that needs to happen about who the legislative appointment would be. There's folks who are interested in serving that seat, but understanding there's new counselors, we didn't want to presume who that co-chair would be on the legislative side yet in that space. So that's a long-winded answer, discussion to say that we're putting forward Andrea as your co-chair for the administration, and we still need to discuss with David, Paula, and Allie who would like to serve in that seat, and then bring that to the steering committee. The steering committee will meet next week, and my hope is that formally you'll have two co-chairs for your next meeting, presuming you choose to meet again in December to finish the work you're going to start today. The other thing I just wanted to flag in that document that is new is that subcommittee membership actually has term limits now too. So when we set up subcommittees and set up membership on them, we did, at the time, we were just so grateful to have people who wanted to help us develop the first plan that we didn't actually discuss sort of the longevity of those seats. Because counselors serve for 3-year terms, we thought that was an appropriate starting place for subcommittees. We made a recommendation, the steering committee and council approved, that subcommittee members will serve 3-year terms and can be reappointed by the steering committee if you choose to stay on past that, but it gives an affirmative space to actually acknowledge that you want to continue on with the work. And it also creates a space for the Climate Action Office and the steering committee to discuss an open and transparent recruiting process to pull in more subcommittee members and recruit. You all may remember that when you all were recruited to serve on the subcommittee, we held a very open, advertised process to try to recruit folks that brought in technical experience, geographic diversity, personal diversity, as well as other experiences to the subcommittee, so that we could broaden the scope of perspective brought by counselors alone. And so all of you who have been subcommittee members officially will term out in January. We will ask you through our process if you would like to stay, and then we'll consider what vacancies exist on the subcommittee and recruit broadly across the 5 subcommittees, with the anticipation and expectation that this winter we'll have fully staffed subcommittees to move into the next climate plan process. What that looks like exactly yet hasn't been articulated. It'll be a conversation with the steering committee over the next month. And I expect the Climate Action Office will support the administration of that in some way. I think that's largely what I had to say, but if there's maybe also, I'll just note what I've been alluding to. I think you probably all are getting the sense, because we keep alluding to another climate action plan. But yes, there is another climate action plan coming faster than some of us would maybe like, but it's the climate action plans are articulated in statute. They are every 4 years. However, the first plan was due December 1st of 2021, and the date changes when they're due in statute. And so the next one is actually due July 1st and isn't a full 4 years. It's 3.5 years because of that date change, the way it's written in statute. So the next one's actually due July 1st of 2025. And so that's only 1.5 years away. And if we don't want to be running up against clocks and thinking about the tensions and time limits that we had in the first one, that means thoughtfully planning out the kind of analysis, engagement work that we want to do now to meet that goal. So, and that'll be relevant to the conversation you have today around policy recommendations, and then also that the conversation that Marion's going to preview around technical analysis. Okay, I'll stop there.
Catherine.
If I might, or Catherine, I have a question for Jane.
Go ahead, David. Catherine, you're still
I'm talking and muted. I apologize. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Now, in a lot of what you've just related to us is a matter of timing and a time frame within which we are working. Where does the speaker's letter fall in that? I mean, is that?
I'm going to let. Yeah, that's going to be the substance of your meeting today that Catherine's going to speak to.
If you're asking when is the response due, it's the plan is to provide a draft response to the council for the council's consideration by December 18th. Fast timeline, very fast timeline.
Okay, it's just that I didn't hear it in the earlier discussion. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, then let's turn to the letter. We're going to spend the next almost hour just beginning this conversation about what type of response would be appropriate. I don't think we're going to have enough time to even perhaps start on the question of what substance needs to be in there, but I think we should at least touch on, what kind of format you envision this might look like, the response overall. But just to provide a little bit of background to David's question. So the council, the letter went to the council. The council has asked this committee to develop the draft and for their response and for consideration at the December 18th meeting. Marion, I don't know, was there any other guidance provided by the council other than that?
No, they just opted to defer to the Rural Resilience Subcommittee to think about developing a response and then obviously bring it back for council approval.
Right.
That was it.
So in terms of, what that really means for this committee, it means that there has to be a draft presented in advance by December 11th for them to review, but going into that meeting. So not much time. And to that end, I think we will have to have another meeting. And we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting in terms of what are the best dates, but we're thinking December 1st or December 4th for those of you who have to drop off. If you want to put in the chat your availability, that would be helpful now, if you have to leave later. So I hope you've seen that the letter, which was posted along with the agenda and the materials for this meeting, but we can kind of go over the highlights of that with you. I think one of the things that the letter does is it definitely recognizes that the council has already done a lot of work on developing recommendations on resilience and adaptation, and notes that there's also been a lot of work that's happened since then, both in terms of the legislature passing laws as well as the state agencies implementing some of the programs and the laws and others of you here, other community partners having already started to make some of the investments or develop some programs that are related. So we do want to talk about that. We want to give that to you as a background so you know what has actually happened since the last climate action plan. But the letter goes on to really say, that's great. But we really need, given what you've been experiencing over the past year, we really need to think about how to expedite this work. And they're asking you directly to help the council, to help them figure out how to prioritize what the legislature can do on that front. I'm going to share my screen if I can. I was thinking I would just share it with you that the four key components of the letter. that talk about what they would like you to focus on. If I can get rid of some of these screens. So let's see, is this it? Let me do this. So this is really in the center of the letter, the 4 elements of the letter that ask you to consider. First of all, what are the toolkits that would help communities, businesses, and residential residents of the state actually start the process of expedited resilience? And it also focuses on equitable communities. The second is what other supports might be needed, particularly for those that are trying to do vulnerability assessments and make decisions around what properties should be defended, what properties should no longer be defended, and then where they actually need to move people out of the way of floodwaters. The third priority was adaptation strategies should be prioritized for statewide for federal and state disaster recovery funding. So that's more about how the money should flow towards these strategies. And then finally was the focus on additional state capacity that might be needed for accelerating adaptation and resilience strategies. That could be, I'm assuming, in the form of personnel, in the form of funding. It's pretty open-ended as I read it. So those were the 4 key focus areas. And what we're going to do today is first talk about what is already underway so that you have that grounding, and it allows you to focus more on what still needs to be done. The letter goes on to reference after those 4 focus areas, some of the 2 of the key pathways that are noted in the climate action plan already. As you know, there's more than 2, but these were 2 that had specific relevance to those focus areas. So wanted to stop there before we actually share with you some of the ongoing work and just get your reaction to the letter, and particularly would be super helpful if you have any suggestions for ways that you envision this letter could, what format it might take. So open the floor for you. Or obviously any questions, which I'm hoping others can help me answer. Yes, Paula.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, David, you probably got this too, but the speaker actually sent us an email, all of the people that she had appointed to the council, asking for a meeting with her as well.
Interesting.
So it's like sort of this side tangent thing going on. I'm not sure how to, how it fits in with everything else, but I just wanted people to know that also is happening. So there might be, like, as we're thinking about like how we might want to respond, it might be good to have like a little bit of something, a precursor, emerging stuff that we could tell her, oh yeah, we're working on it. So
that's very good to know. Yeah.
Well, I in part had asked her to draw us together because and I want to, none of this is pejorative. I'm not calling anybody names or anything else. There's an inherent tension between the legislative and executive branches, and there should be. That's the way government works and is supposed to work. One of the things I was asking for was people who are appointed by the House to be brought together to have a chance to develop a legislative bucket list, for lesser of a word, so that when we came to meetings like this, it wasn't just me responding. I have a response to all 4 of those things that I think might improve Vermont's preparedness, but I have no idea how it fits into a larger context of other members on this committee, other members on the council, other members appointed by the legislature. And so that's sort of an informational step that I was looking to have.
Is that meeting scheduled?
No, not that I'm aware of, Paula.
No, I just asked them yesterday because I've been holding slots open. But the schedule, like what they were looking at, was basically next week. So
yeah,
this is soon.
Okay.
Did you say that was just the House appointees or
Yes.
okay.
Just the people the speaker appointed.
Yeah, Jane.
I guess I just want to flag that that is a unique role or opportunity that I've not seen play out in the counselor space yet. And I do just want to flag that in the governance document, there's a articulated section in that document about sort of like how you speak as a counselor versus as the council, because there was an attempt to speak to how like positions, policy statements, and how you articulate that as an individual in that role wearing your council hat versus like as a council. And so I do just want to, I think Paula, your comment is really great. Like it's really important to have a conversation with the speaker and say what the process is that's playing out at the council. This is the touch points and like, this is how we're going to get to the answer. But articulating individual priorities as a council is a, yeah. Anyway, I just putting the language in the chat. And, you know, David, I think you're right about the inherent tension, but there's still a supermajority of legislative appointments and there's voting and things, you know, things can, policy papers can still carry the day if the legislative appointments want to.
Thanks for the clarification. And so what I'm taking away from that, and not being super familiar with the new governance, but is that the counselors cannot speak on behalf, even the counselors in this government can't speak on behalf of the council when they meet with the legislature. They can speak on the behalf of themselves. Is that the bottom line? Got it. Just to be clear.
Well, unless they've been given a portfolio by the council to represent the council's position.
True. Okay. Any other, I'm really looking for some other input in terms of, you know, we were thinking, well, we got a letter, maybe a letter response is the correct response. We don't have a lot of time, so it can't go into a lot of detail. Curious as to what people are seeing as kind of the level of detail, how much, there's not time for a new analysis or new work, but we have a lot already within the climate action plan itself to work with. So any reactions to what you see going into that, Andrea?
Well, I guess I would just propose, and we can get into a little more detail when we kind of go through some of the activities that are already occurring. But in those 4 categories that she pulls out, to sort of break it down into what is being done, what more the subcommittee feels needs to be done, or, you know, on behalf of the council, and just sort of identify that gap. I'm not sure what more we could do as a response.
As one example of what I saw or felt when I read the letter, I immediately went up to the Department of Environmental Conservation's website. And what I was looking for was the website for municipalities that was put up after Irene, that dozens and dozens and dozens of people from around the state came together, spent time, and came up with here's what you ought to be thinking about. Here's how you ought to be moving forward. And for the life of me, and I'm not exactly computer ignorant, for the life of me, I could not find it. I
Dave?
actually had to ask someone within the department to find that website for me. So my suggestion would be front and center. Every opening page at ANR has linked to resilience, linked to resilience, linked to resilience. There was a huge amount of work done. Ben, you may have even been part of that. Or you might have left the legislature by then, but it was a tremendous amount of work on the part of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And once I got there, they're good information.
So more public, more access and for public awareness, sounds like would be important for you. Alice, I don't want to get into the details of the specific recommendations yet, but sort of
I'm
if you
just going to make a suggestion on the web access for this information. I would look at Flood Ready Vermont. Go to those web pages, because that's what happened is they've taken a lot of the information that was mixed in with the DEC pages, and there's now a Flood Ready Vermont site, which is collecting all the information on suggestions for resilience.
Thanks for that.
Well, some of us old codgers still see DEC as our lead agency.
Right, right. I get
Maybe
it.
they ought to have a button too.
Yes.
All right, Paula.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a little more big picture about the letter. To me, what she's asking for is like, obviously there's a lot of information. There's a lot of work that's been done. I feel like what she's asking the council overall, and by correlatively this subcommittee, is to like not just list everything that's there, but prioritize it. She's asking very clearly for priorities. Like, what should we be, narrowly focused? Like, what's the biggest cost benefit that we can get out of the work that needs to be done, immediately? So like, yeah, we can sort of like list a lot of this is what's already going on, and I think that's important. But it seems to me that what she is asking for, not necessarily in this letter back, is for the council to prioritize things. And so maybe part of our letter back, since we don't have time to probably do all of that work or the expertise necessarily, is to say, here's the process we're going to recommend to create that, prioritize things or something like that.
Very good point. Yes, and she does specifically ask for priorities in the letter, in another portion of the letter. Marion, your hand went up and down. Anything you want to add? Yes, go ahead.
My other thought too is we've already done a lot of this already. If you look at Appendix 13 in all the information that Marion sent out, we actually have a whole matrix there of the recommendations we've had and their priority based on high. I forget exactly what the words were, but I think it would be pretty simple to just take that and maybe try to come to a consensus on the ones that we really do want to move forward. That's all. I reviewed everything we did this morning, and a lot of it's already there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Agreed. And I sense from the letter, the tone of the letter, that they also recognize that it's there. It's just, as you said, if there's more of the same or more shift in priorities that you might want to consider. And there was also uploaded there some recommendations that the council submitted to the legislature for the fiscal year 24 budget based on priorities as well. So that was uploaded. So that's also been offered up as another, and I think Marion, you pulled out specifically the resilience recommendations within that. So that's something else to look at. Let's go ahead and do a quick round robin on just to bring you up to date. There have been some materials that are uploaded from some of the agencies that can give you more detail. So we just want a highlight it's sort of the high level summary of some of the activities that are going on specifically that were already part of the recommendations. And if I'm happy to if we have a volunteer, that would be great. But otherwise, I might ask Jane, would you be the right person to talk about the Climate Action Office activities?
No, I'm going to let Marion do that.
I can speak to that, Catherine. Yeah. Yeah, happy to go first and speak to that. And I think this will get at particularly some of those actions from the Climate Action Plan that this subcommittee included that are now sort of progressing into tool development, resource development for municipalities specifically is a big focus of what we're working on, but happy to speak to some of that in more detail if we're interested. But we'll point folks to on the website, the document, I think it's called Climate Action Office Resilience and Adaptation Priorities. And there's a couple of key projects and deliverables sort of that came out of recommendations from the Climate Action Plan or were specific requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act that we're moving forward in the Climate Action Office. So the first, and I'll just go via the bullets that are in this document so you can reference them directly, is we have an RFP posted for the development of a measuring and assessing progress tool, which will be an online database to track climate action, focused both on reduction of emissions and also metrics and indicators of resilience and adaptation. A lot of that work is actually going to be developing and looking at where we have data sources and resources to develop those metrics and indicators. But that is it was a recommendation in the Climate Action Plan, a requirement of the Global Warming Solutions Act specifically, that the state think about how to track progress towards meeting climate action goals and priorities. So that's work that's moving forward, and the RFP is still posted, still open, but we'll be moving forward that tool and the development of that in the next couple of years. The next, which I think this subcommittee is familiar with, some of the folks have been involved in the development of this, is the development of a geospatial tool to help municipalities understand and explore potential vulnerabilities to climate change. We're calling this the Municipal Vulnerability Index, intended to sort of indicate vulnerability across a number of social, economic, and biophysical factors, and be able to overlay that with climate hazard data where we have it. The intent of this tool is to really help communities understand where climate change and the sort of climate change pressures will focus on communities, economy, jobs, the environment, and certain sectors like transportation, electrical grid, housing, emergency services, and communications infrastructure. That work is moving forward. We're expecting to have a tool finalized early next year in February or March. We've done we did a number of stakeholder engagement events earlier this summer and are moving through tool development at this point in the process. Happy to share more about that in more detail, but that was a key recommendation from the subcommittee in the Climate Action Plan, again, as well as a requirement in the Global Warming Solutions Act and something that the Climate Action Office is implementing. Let's see, other items on this list. We'll be thinking about sort of implementation of that Municipal Vulnerability Index once complete, in partnership with regional planning commissions and other providers, to think about how we really roll that out collaboratively and ensure support for municipalities to use it. The next item, and then this gets a little bit to your point, David, about resources for municipalities following floods. I know there's a lot of resources out there, and what someone pointed to with Flood Ready is a great resource for flooding and sort of understanding steps that municipalities can take to address flooding hazard. We're also working on developing, although we'll say it's been paused for a while because of some IT challenges, but eventually we'll be developing and sort of finalizing a climate toolkit, which will be a collection of resources from state partners and other agency partners and other external partners on resources that municipalities can access to help them take action to address climate change. And so this won't just address flooding, it will be sort of across the climate hazard spectrum, connecting resources to help communities think about planning, project implementation, and then ultimately finding funding resources. And that toolkit will be closely connected with the Municipal Vulnerability Index that we're developing. And then just the last key piece that I'll speak to is we have funds in our budget for this year to develop what we're calling a resilience investment analysis. So to really take a look at, can we model or understand sort of the payoff or deferred damage costs associated with investment in resilience and adaptation activities. We're still thinking about what questions to even ask in that type of analysis, how to sort of format the questions and a potential RFP in that space. But hope it will help serve as a tool and a resource as we build the next climate action plan to really understand the sort of investment needs and ultimate payoffs at certain timescales of resilience actions. So those are some key projects we're working on in this space. Again, I think, Catherine, we're doing a quick round robin on this and hope we'll be able to frame up where more information on this might be helpful for our next meeting to frame up a response to the speaker's letter. But again, a number of those priorities come out of directly from the Climate Action Plan and from requirements in the Global Warming Solutions Act, and I think speak to some of the items in the speaker's letter there. I'll hand it back to you, Catherine.
That was perfect level of detail. Thanks. Andrea, do you want to talk about VTrans planned activities or ongoing activities?
Yeah, I can do that. I just lost my page, but found it. So yeah, and Otis can jump in as he's been definitely involved in this pretty deeply since he started. But the way the agency really thinks about climate adaptation in general sort of aligns with like a continuous improvement mindset for the what is I think of as plan, do, study, act. And so that kind of aligns with prepare, respond, recover, mitigate. And that's the way we kind of operate, planning and looking at different things from our planning. We've got some tools that we've developed in the past, our transportation resilience planning tool. We have a repeat damages tool. We now have a resilience improvement plan that kind of takes those things together and prioritizes locations throughout the state that are vulnerable and high risk. We look at resilience in our project prioritization processes. So giving some credence to projects that help to tackle our vulnerabilities. And then, so that's the planning part. We've got a lot to do with preparedness and recovery. We have our incident command system that gets institutionalized and activated when there is an event to respond to. We have a continuity of operations plan that talks about how we need to be prepared and how we will respond. We do some outreach and education of our staff and municipalities throughout the state for through our rivers and roads training to just educate people on how those two interact together and how we can build systems that are more resilient. And then sort of on the act or the mitigation side of things is just our design standards. We've been working really closely with A&R. We have a good relationship with A&R Rivers and others, of course, at DEC and other parts of A&R, but we've been working with them on our design standards for, over 20 years, certainly more intently after Irene and kind of getting that rivers and roads training up to speed. But we have codes and standards. We have design standards that we use that are meant to not just pass water, but also pass debris, which is a major cause of issues when we have events. So our design standards are meant to address that for less impact. We definitely saw in this past storm event that a lot of what we did during Irene stood up to this storm, which was great. I mean, no two storms are the same, so it's hard to really have an apples to apples comparison, but we know what we're doing is helping. So that's just sort of our normal design standards. And now with our resilience improvement plan and some targeted funding from the Federal Highway Administration, we're looking at how we can really target some of those high vulnerable areas that we identified in our resilience improvement plan. We also, our design standards kind of extend down to municipalities through our town highway, road and bridge standards. So those are standards that if towns adopt and incorporate, then they have less match with FEMA grants and FEMA assistance during events or after events. So those are just kind of some of our design aspects. That is pretty much, did I miss anything, Otis?
No, I think the only thing I want to chime in on is that to mention that most of the tools, nearly all of them that we're developing, extends beyond the state system, sort of what Andrea ended on there as far as how this loops in municipalities also. But a lot of these sort of tools are developing for vulnerability and identifying priority locations extends beyond the state network to the municipal network as well. So that's really
Right.
all I
We
have
work
to say.
really closely with our RPCs, and we're trying to get word out through the tax and just education of what tools are available for planning at the municipal level, and teaching them how to use those tools so that they can sort of help to identify what their vulnerabilities are, and then, you know, also closely working with them to provide funding to address those issues.
Thanks. And just for awareness, we have uploaded some of the materials that you shared, that you just covered for details. So for today's meeting, so you can find it there. And that's actually how I'm calling on folks, is where I saw there were materials uploaded, and then I'll go to folks that may have more to add. David Grass, I mean, did you want to speak to the Department of Health activity?
Yeah, sure. I don't know that any of the activities that I'm going to talk about are called out specifically in the climate action plan. The health department was neck deep in COVID response during the drafting of the climate action plan, so we weren't able to be very involved. We're hoping to rectify that the next time around and be more of a partner. We have had funding since 2012 from the CDC for the climate and health program, which I mentioned earlier. At the outset, the charge for that program was to assess the health vulnerabilities of the state broadly, be able to project their magnitude in some quantitative fashion, and then recommend activities to mitigate those risks. And so we identified a number of risks, including heat, flooding, air quality, cyanobacteria, vector-borne disease, and waterborne disease. But the nature of that work was sort of necessarily topical. The program is staffed by 1.3 full-time employees, a program manager, and a portion of an epidemiologist. So it didn't allow for a very deep dive in any one particular area. The nature of the program funding changed around 2017, 2018, where CDC was asking us to pick one or two things to work on where we could demonstrate that we were having an appreciable impact on that problem, so that as a nation, we could take advantage of the states as the laboratory of democracy, and that those approaches might be scaled up nationally. So the areas that Vermont's climate and health program decided to focus on were hot weather preparedness, and also promotion of weatherization and health initiatives. And that assessment was due in part to our assessment of risk, but also to an acknowledgement that there is already robust ongoing activity in terms of flood preparedness. And so we wanted to focus our activities in those areas where we thought we could have the biggest effect. So an example of the health hot weather preparedness work that we've been engaged in over the last couple of years, we have contracted with 8 of the regional planning commissions to use a template for local hot weather preparedness plans. And the regional planning commissions in turn have partnered with municipalities to complete 24 local hot weather preparedness plans. This coming year, we're going to increase that tally to 9 regional planning commissions, and are looking to complete an additional 7 local hot weather preparedness plans. And that's been an area where we feel like we're making tangible progress towards identifying who are the vulnerable people at the local scale. Ben Rose will tell you that all emergencies are local. And so getting away from sort of the state level planning and getting to that local level response, it feels like a step in the right direction. Responding to the wildfire smoke this summer, Vermont has a reputation as a state with excellent air quality. And I think we were taken off guard a little bit by the repeated poor air quality events that we had, and so we mustered a response in order to be able to put guidance information on our website, and specifically trying to provide information for schools and childcares to inform their plans for activities, for outdoor activities with children. That's an area of ongoing collaboration with Department of Environmental Conservation. We are hoping that by next summer, we will be in a better place in order to prevent harm from those acute air pollution events due to the work that we do during the off season. One other thing that I'll mention is that Jared Ulmer, who may come on the call a little bit later, who is the program manager for the Climate and Health program, has also worked with VEM to apply for funding through FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant in order to do something of an infrastructure assessment at places that provide care to vulnerable populations like long-term care facilities, to assess what is their capacity to provide cooling during a hot weather event, and what is their capacity for backup power. So just sort of a basic baseline understanding of if we are in a severe hot weather event, will we be able to provide cool temperatures indoors for the people who are most vulnerable. I think I'll stop there, but there are other activities that we have ongoing as well.
And again, just let people know that those details you can look at on the materials that were provided. Wanted to move to Anne. I think that there were some materials loaded about the comprehensive energy plan and the resilience activities under that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, sure. And I guess just as a threshold matter, it felt to me, looking at the speaker's letter, that it was focused on sort of the flood resilience in particular, and looking at sort of land use and patterns of development, and not quite sure sort of where energy fits in that. But of course, there's a whole bunch of resilience activity around energy, not just sort of the electric grid, but the whole picture of energy resilience and a bunch of different scales. So just broad kind of sweep here. Most of what I'm going to talk about relates to the electric grid, which is sort of where we stand in the regulatory space. You know, we in Vermont have local distribution utilities that have poles and wires that sort of serve down to end use customers, but we are also part of a regional grid, and we rely on that as much as our local grid and energy resources for resilience. So to me, it's just really, it's helpful to think about resilience in terms of the scale and the specific threat, in terms of what is the correct mitigation. You know, you don't want to put square peg, round hole. Folks think of resilience, they might think about energy storage. That maybe is the right solution for specific types of threats, but you know, there may be other solutions. Mike was talking earlier about undergrounding lines. That could be a different type of solution that's employed to benefit a different kind of set of people, or for a different threat, or at different costs. So I'm going to be talking here about the electric grid, but obviously the electric grid is increasingly serving our heating and transportation energy needs. And so, you know, reliability, which has always been a core tenet of planning for the grid, as well as resilience, which is looking at these sort of higher impact, lower frequency weather events, increasingly driven by climate. It's that much more important, right? As we're relying on plugging in our EVs to get around in the winter, and we're relying on turning on our heat pumps to heat our homes in the winter, that the grid is able to serve those needs, whether it's in resilience to an ice storm event, trees falling, lines going down, or whether it's like a polar vortex, right, that's happening and impacting the ability of energy resources in the region to supply our nighttime winter energy needs. So that's all part of the resilience picture we're looking at. So just in that context, after the Christmas time storms last winter, our commissioner stood up a winter readiness task force to ask the electric and transmission grid operators in Vermont, the utilities and Velco, to coordinate around sort of an extended, we call it a load shedding event, if those upstream energy supplies are limited in some fashion due to something like a polar vortex. Sort of how are they going to coordinate amongst themselves to make sure that if there's something as extreme or dire as like a rolling blackout, that's conducted in a way that is the least disruptive to sort of end use customers. We also updated our integrated resource planning guidance. All of the distribution utilities have to file an integrated resource plan every 3 years that looks at everything from their power supply resources to how they're planning their grid and how they're planning to state energy and climate requirements. In that updated guidance, we've asked the utilities to describe their resilience planning efforts and that whole kind of toolbox of efforts that I was speaking to earlier. We also updated our energy planning standards for regions and municipalities. So speaking to the local level, asking them as part of their enhanced energy plans to look at land use as well as energy resilience sort of needs and plans. We getting down to the level of storage in particular. So there was a recommendation in the climate action plan to really try to seek out external funding with all of the Infrastructure Act funding and American Rescue Plan Act funding coming in to try to secure some of that for Vermont utilities and customers to defray the costs of some of these upfront costs of some of these resilience investments. So with some ARPA funding, we were allocated $7 million for the whole suite, load management, storage. We issued a request for proposals for that to the distribution utilities earlier this year. I think we got about $11 million in requests for that funding. So still working on negotiating those contracts right now, but essentially those are going to be energy storage systems for low and moderate income customers, really prioritizing those who have the highest medical needs and are in the areas where there's more reliability deficiencies or resilience deficiencies, so more outages or more frequent outages or longer outages historically. So there's, definitely, and also to municipal buildings as well to serve as sort of those resilience hubs. So definitely greater need there than the funding that we were able to allocate. If anyone's looking to repurpose some ARPA funding, the department also had applied for about $100 million in Infrastructure Act funding under it's called the GRIP program that would have supported about 75 megawatts of distributed, so end use customer, also commercial, sort of commercial entities and municipal entities of storage. We did not receive funding for that. It's the first round of GRIP funding from DOE, but we're looking at whether we'll reapply in subsequent rounds. So hopefully that's a snapshot of broad and specific things that we're working on. Happy to dive into any of those if folks are interested.
Thanks, Anne. I think the only other, trying to see if there was anything else that was posted that we want to cover. Did I miss anybody, Miriam? And I think the only other, just would open it up to any other state agencies that have activities that weren't able to post them in advance.
Or others.
Yes, and then, yeah, Michael.
Thanks, Catherine. And of course, I get a phone call and had to walk away right as Anne. I missed some of what Anne said. I apologize for that. But, certainly we have been doing a ton of resiliency work, specifically right now in southern Vermont, southeastern Vermont, to really pinpoint. It's where we're seeing the worst of the winds, worst of the frozen precip. And that's where we're focused on right now. I do think, listening to Andrea earlier, like VTrans, we know where we're doing these resiliency projects, they're working. And my thought is to get some of the funds released as soon as we can to those projects that we know work right off. A lot of the areas that we had to work around in the flooding this past summer in July, some of those roads that Andrea was talking about that actually held up, we were able to drive to and get to customers where back in Irene, those roads were gone. So we know that the work that VTrans does, we know works. We know the work that we do works. And, if we analyze for another 3 or 4 years before we start to release some of these funds, it's 3 to 4 years that we waited that I'm not sure that's the best thing for Vermonters. So that is my pitch, is if we know we have programs that work, and traveling and power are two of the most important things we do in emergencies, let's do everything we can to try to get those things funded. Thank you.
Yeah, good advice. Well said. Alice, did you want to share some of your experiences and work?
Well, yes. I just also have a quick question for Michael from Green Mountain Power. Green Mountain Power is launching a battery backup solution for homes, I think in Vermont, I think in the central region.
Yes, I can certainly speak to that a little bit. We have a current battery program right now that we were successful about 3 or 4 months ago. We used to have a cap of 500 batteries a year only. With the Vermont Public Service Department support, we were able to get the PUC to approve what we called lift the cap, which now if a customer wants storage in their home, they can call, get on a list, and as soon as we can have the electricians and the batteries to get them installed, we can do that. So that is a program that any customer in Vermont can participate in right now. I think the program you're talking about is we did just file a what we're calling the Zero Outages Initiative, which is to take all the programs that we are doing now and that we know work, and dramatically increase the pace of those projects, because like I explained earlier, the most we've had is 2, and then this past 12 months we've had 6 storms. We have forecasters that we've been using for years, and I remember people used to think they were crazy with some of the things that they were telling us back in probably the 2010, 2012, 13 timeframe. And now those forecasts have actually been surpassed just in the 10 years. So I do believe we need to move this forward. But to answer your question, in the Zero Outages Initiative, the storage would actually, in that program, if approved, would be dictated by, we have our distribution circuits broken into zones. So depending on the reliability of the line you're on and where you live on that distribution circuit, there wouldn't be the possibility of storage in the homes at first, eventually out over 7 years, getting to where there's some type of storage available to everyone. Vehicle to grid is something that we know 2 manufacturers of bidirectional chargers is working on that right now. So if you've got even one of the lower range vehicles with a 70 kW battery, that's equivalent to 7 sets of power walls in your home. So we do think there's going to be innovation and incredible ability in the future for storage. But yes, we have the existing program, and then we have another program in front of our regulators right now that we hope to be able to move forward with as early as next spring or summer. I don't know if that answers your question, Alice.
Yes, it does. I think I really applaud Green Mountain Power on this. I think it really is something that customers are going to see right away. And I think it is a very positive step towards really promoting, I think, lots of climate change mitigation ideas. So the only other thing I have is, I don't know if you're interested in activities that are happening on the local level.
Yes. Yes.
We have here in the Mad River Valley, the Friends of the Mad River have a kind of subsidiary group, and sorry I'm doing this without video, but I'm not able to access it right now. The Friends of the Mad River has a subsidiary group called Ridged Rivers, and the group is rejuvenating, and beginning to meet with lots of new members that are like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to learn about this, but I'm really interested in climate change and preserving. How can we do this? So the Ridged Rivers has taken more of a swing over to climate change, and we're looking at a program that would look at individual ideas for residents to look at their properties and their heating arrangements, et cetera, to see where they can reduce climate change, and also mitigation of preserving natural resources at their own property level. And then we have a second part of this that's going to be a community look at what we can find and suggest throughout the whole community. That would include the Mad River Valley. It would include Moortown, Waitsfield, Fayston, and Warren, looking at community ways to do climate change mitigation and preserve natural resources. And the third one would be more of a complete regional look at what our region is doing, working with CVRPC to develop programs for our region, and how these individual or community programs that we're looking at would fit into a regional strategy. So we've had 2 meetings on that. We've had, and we have a very good new hire who is doing a good job at keeping us motivated with homework and things like that too. So, and we have another group who's just a conduit for all kinds of information via email and Front Porch Forum on climate change articles. So I think things are starting to perk up here in the Mad River Valley among the residents.
Thanks, Alice. Sounds like you're starting at the very grassroots landowner.
Yes, it's a grassroots effort, which I think is really good.
Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. I saw Ben. Did you want to? Oh, it looks like Ben, we just lost Ben.
Yeah, Catherine, I think VM's been doing a lot of great stuff in this space, and I'm going to pass it off to the expert Stephanie to give an update on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric. And I'm sorry if I missed a prompt before this. Our notes didn't make it in, but I can, if it's helpful, I can type some things up and send that over. So let me know, Marion, if that's helpful. But to give an overview, so within the VEM hazard mitigation program, adaptation and
oops, sorry.
No worries. Adaptation and improving resilience in Vermont is very much the entire focus of our program. So I'll start with, I mentioned the state hazard mitigation plan, but I'll add a couple of sentences to that and then speak to our grant funding. So on the state plan, some of you were very heavily involved in that update, so thank you for that. But for those who are less familiar, it goes through all of the natural hazards that we're vulnerable to in Vermont, and then assesses what our vulnerability is to those hazards and puts together a strategy of mitigation actions to hazard mitigation actions, which are really adaptation, to reduce our risk to those hazards. So it's a cross-agency effort, including significant stakeholder engagement beyond state government. And again, we have that final now. So once we get official sign off from FEMA next week, we'll be sending that back out. But we've been working with Marion and the team at the Climate Action Office to make sure that that plan is speaking to the Climate Action Plan. They're speaking to each other, and we're not creating inefficiency between the two documents. So that's an ongoing conversation that we're going to keep having as the next Climate Action Plan gets updated. So that's the planning side. And then on the funding side, so whenever we have a large disaster in the state that's federally declared, we get an allocation under what's called the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So it's FEMA funding, but it's managed through Vermont Emergency Management. So we decide what projects go to FEMA for review. They're not making decisions on they're not selecting projects. We are with an interagency committee of stakeholders. And so that pot, I keep saying we're going to have 30 million, but I just got updated numbers from Ben. It looks like we're going to have 45 million or more under that funding round. So that exceeds the 34 million we had following Irene. And the biggest use of that funding is implementing projects. So looking at property buyouts, elevating homes, large floodplain restoration projects, floodproofing activities, things like the Brandon Overflow Culvert, for those who are familiar with that. That's one of the projects we completed following Irene. That's been very successful. So any of those larger infrastructure projects to reduce risk more broadly. And we're going to be doing a scoping assessment statewide in specific communities that were hardest hit as a part of that to develop projects for that funding round. So hoping to have an award on the scoping piece within the next couple of weeks. But that 45 million or so that we'll have available will likely be due towards the end of next year. So with potentially more extensions from FEMA, but looking at the end of next year. And then David mentioned the BRIC program. So the FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. One of the applications we submitted last year is that Vermont Department of Health application. But that's really one of the best pots we have for statewide planning and scoping activities. So if there are state agencies or municipalities that want to apply for scoping or planning that helps us advance hazard mitigation work, that fits there very nicely. So there's some actions identified within the state hazard mitigation plan that help us better understand our risk or help us move the needle on any of these things. So those planning activities are eligible under BRIC. There is a current funding round open with a state deadline of January 12th. So if anyone has statewide planning activities or more local planning activities that you think might be a good fit there, please reach out to me and we can chat about getting an application put together. So that's the BRIC program. And then the last one I'll talk about, last but very much not least, is the Flood Resilient Communities Fund. So this is, Ben mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. This is the pride and joy of my program, our state program to reduce flood risk in Vermont. So it was one of the top priorities of the 2018 State Hazard Mitigation Plan to create a statewide program to reduce flood risk. And with ARPA funding, we were able to get that program created. It was created through a line in the budget, so it doesn't currently exist in statute. So my hope personally is that through this next session, we're able to create the program in statute and hopefully find some sustainable way to fund that program going forward. So we're down, ARPA's temporary, we're down to $3 million in that pot. And the focus of that fund is to do the things that we know we need to do in Vermont to reduce flood risk, but that don't fit into the perfect little FEMA boxes of what projects they want to see, which is a decent amount of our flood risk in the state that doesn't perfectly fit that FEMA mold. So there's a need for further support for whatever the next phase of that program looks like. I will stop there. Eric, did I miss anything that you're thinking about?
No, you hit all the high points.
The last one sounds like a perfect ask for this subcommittee to consider moving forward to the legislature. So anybody else have anything you want to share that would help us understand what's already going on, what's planned, investments, sources of funding? Okay, well, thanks for all that. It was a lot of information. Some of it is in written form. Yes, go ahead.
I could not find my raise hand signal.
Okay, go ahead.
My apologies, I'm just jumping in. I just, on behalf of ACCD, totally unprepared, missed Marion's memo to prepare something about what the agency is working on in terms of resilience, or I guess what the HCD is working on in terms of resilience. I just wanted to tack on one bit to what Stephanie was just going over. Sometimes I feel like our agency is a little cuckoo bird, like we plant things in other people's wheelhouses. But just as an aside to the FEMA money that Stephanie was talking about, we've been working to try and pull together some partners and get some additional funding sources to help do community process around some of these big infrastructure projects that are going to happen. So making sure that the communities that were most impacted by these floods are able to come and have a community process to help decide what kind of infrastructure projects they want to see happen in their community. The other thing I'll mention really quickly is that the state's designation programs do a lot to help kind of encourage smart growth type development. But it's become, really apparent after these last floods that a lot of our downtowns and villages are river adjacent and in floodplains. So we've added an amendment to a consultant contract to help reform our designation programs to include sort of a deep dive on climate resilience, both in terms of sort of these immediate opportunities around flood resilience. So looking at different incentives that might encourage buildings, large buildings to be more resilient, whether that means, renovating a building to move equipment out of the basement. There's some opportunities to do that through tax credits. And then also looking at the designation program is intended to sort of find appropriate places for housing in flood safe places. And that's going to be even more important now that we're also looking at potential buyouts. So it's really tough to do buyouts if you don't have other places where you can say, here is where you can build a house and live safely away from flood. So just wanted to mention those are two projects that we're working on. Nothing quite ready to share yet, but maybe at our next meeting, I'd be able to share more about what those recommendations are in the designation reform specific to climate resilience.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in, Brahma. It sounds like some stuff going on that Alice might be able to take advantage of as well. So we've run over a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we had some time for public comment. Again, this is informational so that we all are sort of on the same starting gate about what's already underway, and we don't expect you to have absorbed it all in this session. So it may require some homework to go back and look at that before we get into our next discussion about where those gaps are. Do we have any members of the public? And Marion, you'll have to remind me, would I be able to see them if they were here?
You would, and we do not, so.
Oh, all right, well, so I guess that saves us 10 minutes, and it does leave. Yes, David, did you?
Madam Chair, if I could, you're right. This is a huge amount of information in an hour and 15 minutes. For those of us who have not been active in government in a while, were in fact memos written, and can they be shared?
Yes. Both of those. So if you log into the materials for this meeting on the calendar site, there a lot of this information is in written form there. So there's Department of Health, Comprehensive Energy Plan, Climate Action Office. So and it sounds like we might be able to ask others that didn't have a chance to upload their documents. The people, I think most of the agencies at least have written some sort of summaries of this type of information. And we were hoping to get as much of it as possible to you in advance.
All right, thank you.
And we'll ask for others to share what they have, and Miriam, would it be appropriate just to keep uploading it to this same meeting site so people know where to go?
Yeah, and I think, given what folks have heard, I think we'll determine how we want to structure the next meeting as well. If there's certain things you want to dive into more deeply. But yeah, I'll continue. If folks want to share more resources with me, happy to post it for the meeting materials from today's meeting. And it's all online, so anyone can access it.
So that will be part of our next steps, what additional information you'd like or what you'd like us to help in terms of preparing for our conversation, hopefully early December. Let's give, I'll just hand it to you, Miriam. You said you needed about 5 minutes to cover sort of this, just to tee up and have people thinking about the technical needs.
Yeah, I'll keep this very brief so we can kind of round out and think about next steps, but wanted to just seed a conversation point and question for our next meeting. So as Jane spoke to earlier, we're gearing up. The next climate action plan is due in July of 2025. And part of the work for that, for the last climate action plan and for this one where we'd like to expand it, is thinking about sort of what technical analysis needs are needed to help the council and the subcommittee sort of understand the lay of the land in terms of climate change impacts in Vermont to help inform action development for the next climate action plan. At the last, so one of your sort of sister subcommittees, the Science and Data Subcommittee, they started this conversation and are going to be coming to these other subcommittees, yourself included, to ask and get your thoughts on what technical analysis might be needed prior to the next climate action plan. This would be things like modeling. Some examples from the last climate action plan, most were focused on greenhouse gas reduction. And so we're really trying to broaden the scope to include resilience and adaptation activities. But some examples from the last climate action plan include the pathways analysis, which was an analysis to look at what sort of actions were needed to meet our greenhouse gas reduction requirements that come in the Global Warming Solutions Act. The carbon budget, which was looking at the balance of greenhouse gas emissions and carbon stocks in our agriculture, forestry, and other land use areas. So I'm seeding the conversation and not going to dive into it too much. I have a handful. I was looking at both the State Hazard Mitigation Plan and the Climate Action Plan, whether there were actions that sort of spoke to needs for understanding hazard impacts on sectors and communities in the state that we could group under this category of technical analysis. From the CAP, to remind you all, there was an action around completing a climate change impact assessment for Vermont's commercial and natural resource sectors, understanding source water vulnerabilities, evaluating risks and opportunities on Vermont's sort of critical infrastructure sectors. So sort of types of analyses that would be needed that could help then inform action development for the next climate action plan. So seeding that, as there will be a more specific ask coming from the Science and Data Subcommittee, will likely include it as an agenda item for the next Rural Resilience meeting in December. But wanted to just put that out there now to start brainstorming and thinking about potential technical analysis needs that the Climate Council could consider for the next CAP.
Thanks. Okay, so that leaves us like the next 12 minutes, 13 minutes to talk about three things that are important. One, we want to set set some times or options for the next meeting. And I'm going to suggest that we try to do some of that through chat. I appreciate that people have already indicated when they are available on the 1st or the 4th. Those are the 2 days that we've identified that would help us stay within the time frame we've got to work with. If others of you could also include your availability on those 2 days, that would be great. If we don't get enough information, because I know people have dropped off, if we don't get enough, we will send out a quick doodle poll just to make sure we're getting as many folks as we can on one of those 2 days. Okay, the second item is we would like to actually recruit a drafting committee for this response. So again, we've lost some folks and we'll probably need to follow up by email for that. But we would like to have at least 2, if not more. I don't know what I think you get too many folks and it gets more difficult to actually try to draft together, but we'd like a couple of different individuals to volunteer, if you would, to help draft the response. We're thinking that it would be helpful for that group to at least start thinking about an outline for that letter by the next meeting, just to get some reactions from this group. Since we haven't talked about any substance, we wouldn't expect you to do anything on that front. unless there's something you heard very clearly here. But if we could just get an idea of what the big, topics would be covered in that letter. We've had some suggestions that we should, think about each of those 4 categories, explain what we know is already ongoing and being, in planning phase in those 4 categories, and where those gaps are, and try to prioritize what we think the legislature should be considering. So that's been one suggestion of what that might look like. The next step then would be, after our next meeting, for that group to really take pen to paper and draft the response for this group to consider. I guess it's an open question about how we would provide input on that. Obviously, there's the option of having email input on the draft, or if we feel like we really need another meeting to discuss it, we could do that as well. But it would just have to be really fast turnaround in order to get it finalized by the 11th. So that is a proposed game plan. The other question, I guess, outstanding is, thinking after what you've heard, does anything come to top of mind about what else you feel like you would need, other information you would need to help inform your discussion at our next meeting about what specific recommendations and prioritization would be appropriate to include? So let me start with volunteers. Anybody here that would like to volunteer to be on that drafting committee? We'd like to have certainly some other counselor members, if you're available, and then state agencies to help if they have the capacity. Anybody?
Yeah, I just put in the chat that I kind of feel like 3 to 4 people should be the max. I think after that it'll start to get a little bit
unwieldy
down. Yeah. And I'm happy to volunteer as one of the state people, if there aren't other people who are able to step up to do that.
And Paula, did I see your hand raise briefly?
Yeah, I was volunteering and I realized maybe we're using the chat for that. So I did it both places.
That'd be great. That's awesome. So Andrea and Paula, I got 2.
And I'm happy to help as well, Catherine.
Yes. I guess we'll for those that aren't here that had to leave early, we'll certainly make that offer to them as well. But it sounds like I like your idea, Andrea, of let's try to keep this to 4 max. Now that we have 3 volunteers, let's maybe see if there's one other person that might want to join.
I have some time too, between now and the end of in December to help out.
Okay, well, that might be our group right there. Thank you, Alice.
You're welcome. Sorry about the dog.
I didn't hear him, but
okay, he's
like dog, so that's okay. Okay, so that's great. We have a way forward. So I think we'll work with you to try to see if there's a time that you guys can get together before the next meeting. Again, that'll be December 1st or 4th. That's a Friday and a Monday. And we'll try to turn that around and get that pinned down as quickly as possible. And then the last piece is there anything, you've heard a lot of updates here. There's also in that materials list for this meeting, there is, as I mentioned earlier, the climate action plan resilience chapters where you have in that matrix. I think, Michael, you mentioned that matrix is a very great way to get a snapshot of all the recommendations that relate to resilience and adaptation. And then there is the document that it's a sort of an excerpt from the document that went from the council to the legislature. The date on that letter was 2022, but it was to inform the fiscal year 24 budget process of things that the council had already put forward as important priorities for the legislature. So that's another data point to take into account when we go into our next meeting. Anything else you need? Anything else we should be thinking about getting prepared in advance?
And I'm remiss in that I haven't read everything yet, but in the discussions today, there was not much that I heard, it could be my ears, but that I heard for the average homeowner. The average, owns a duplex or has a home and runs a business out of his garage and whatever. And when their culverts back up and flood, every culvert downstream is at risk. And so, and rural presumes small in terms of operations. And if people have that as part of their thinking or their organization's thinking, highlight it for me. And if it's there, then ignore what I'm saying. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think that's a good point. So if there's specific areas that you would like to see, pulled out, I don't know if there's Alice, you had mentioned earlier some of the work that you're doing, but I don't know how.
Yes, I'm going to put in the Bridge to Rivers website is not updated yet with the new program that I talked about the climate mitigation categories we're looking at now. But I am going to put a link to previous work that we've done we call it Storm Smart, where we have gone, staff and members have gone to individual residents that request this, and we do a storm smart analysis on the way the water flows through their yard. We recommend less mowing. We're really against gas leaf blowers. That's an anathema to us. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat to our Storm Smart program that still continues.
And that sounds like that could be a model for other communities.
Yes, it's and if you think about it, we reach 4 towns here advertising this program. So many more speaking engagements to local webinars through Yes Tomorrow. So if we look around and find local things like these grassroots things, I think it would be helpful. But this has been a lot. The first focus was on flood mitigation. It still is, but we're wrapping things now under a full umbrella of climate change.
Thanks for that.
So if our writers might keep that in mind and figure out some way how to make that an asset and tool statewide.
I think so. And I think actually, if you look at other river programs, like there's the Friends of the Winooski River they just gave, they're giving a 3-part presentation on river quality, the river corridor, and things that the Winooski Friends of the Mad River have done to improve riparian buffers for soil, to prevent soil erosion. It actually they've done things with how to redo your lawn so that the water stays and is absorbed on your property rather than adding to the water flow of a flood. So I think we just have to look around, and I think you'll probably find that there are a number of local programs out there that are working on this from the individual and community level that I think there's already quite a bit of work happening out there that blends right into this overall statewide action plan.
Yeah, and I guess keeping in mind that this is an ask about what the legislature can do to support those types of activities, right? So, it's, you know, that's it. You're right, David. We don't have a lot of information about the local level activities, but if we could think about the types of programs that we do know about, and then the question really is, what can the legislature do to help enhance, facilitate, support those types of programs? So let me just summarize what we are going to do between now and our next meeting. One, we'll either set the date for that meeting or we'll Google if we don't have enough information from the chat. But we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. We're going to upload any other program information, either on ongoing programs or funding that's available. Please do provide that to Marion, and she'll make sure it gets up on the website. We want to we convene the drafting committee at least once between now and the next meeting, so that you can think about what an outline of the letter might look like. So Marion, maybe we can work together to think about how to coordinate that. And then I think the other piece is if folks could spend some time just reviewing the recommendations and you know that we've already made, that you've already made, that have and think about that task of either prioritizing or identifying gaps. I think that's what our work is going to be at the next meeting for the most part. Let's see, anything else that I missed? And appreciate the volunteers for starting to move this forward, and everybody here that was able to attend. And we'll again hopefully see you in another 2 weeks. Seems like it's coming up fast.
Is it possible that our little work group could hang on for another minute after this meeting ends, just to figure out what time to schedule that?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Focus at the time. Yeah. Alice, Paula, Andrea, and Marion. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Do that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for the facilitation, Catherine.
Sure.
Yes, thank you.